Yo, this is Bench Gamer here, and this is my first impressions of Zenless Zone Zero after playing it for about a day. I have about maybe 8 or 9 hours of actual gameplay time. I've reached Internaut level 22. I have gone to Hollow Zero, where they've introduced the bamboo system. In terms of the story, I've just met Miyaka, or Miyato, Miyabi, yeah, Miyabi, and she just kind of shat on the giant mech lady that we saw in the trailers all the time, the one with the big dress that looks like flour and the big boobas. So that's where I'm at in terms of the game. And that's just what my impressions are going to be based off of. I'm sure that future content is going to alter my impressions somewhat, at least to some degree, but this is just based on my first 8 hours of gameplay experience on the first day. And if you probably already know what my feelings are on the game if you've read my community post, as well as probably what it says in the title of this video or the thumbnail, which is that I think this is the best gacha game that has come out since Genshin Impact, at least for me. Again, all of this is subjective opinion. Everybody has their own opinions, and I'm going to get into why I am very biased in like just 2 seconds. But yeah, this is my favorite gacha game out of all the gacha games I've played, including Nikkei, Arknights, Reverse 1999, Wuthering Waves, Tower Fantasy. I think this is my favorite game just right out of the gate. And I definitely think it has the best opening experience so far since Genshin Impact. Maybe Honkai Star Rail is better in terms of opening, but I don't think it's by much. I think Wuthering Waves was probably the worst out of all the games, all the gacha games I've played in terms of just welcoming the player into the game and trying to onboard them to the game itself and introduce them to the different systems and what is interesting about the game. So I'm going to go right ahead and say why I like this game more. And that's the fact that this is not an open world game. I know this is going to be kind of a mind fuck because I think for a lot of people it has just become accepted that open world games are the superior way of doing like action RPGs, that everything has to be an open world. Elden Ring is an open world, Breath of the Wild is an open world, Genshin Impact is an open world, all the Ubisoft games are open world. Everything is an open world now, and that's why it's become so fucking boring to me. Ever since Genshin Impact came out, there are basically two different kinds of gacha games. There are the gacha games like Nikkei, the Arknights, the Reverse 1999s, the JPEG simulators where you collect different JPEGs of pretty women and pretty guys, and that is the one corner of gacha games. And then on the other corner are the Genshin likes, the Tower Fantasies and the Wuthering Waves, and they each do their own thing differently. But the thing that they do differently is like 20% of the game. Tower Fantasy is an MMO, whereas Wuthering Waves has a more intricate, more detailed, more hardcore, and difficult action combat system. But for the other 80% of the game, it's basically just Genshin Impact. Like, let's be honest, even though Wuthering Waves has like a grappling system and a double jump, the fact that the game's world itself is actually modeled and built around that system makes it so that you actually get to different places at around the same time as in Genshin Impact, because the world in Genshin Impact is denser, whereas the world and distances in Wuthering Waves is larger. So the distances are larger, which means that even if you go faster and you have infinite stamina, you're still getting to around the same places at the same time. And I find myself, when I'm traversing Wuthering Waves, to be kind of annoyed by just going around and having to go to all of these different places to get chests. The fact that I can already do that in Genshin Impact just makes me want to do that much less in other gachas. And the fact that all of the new high budget, triple A gachas essentially these days are built around the Genshin system has made me kind of jaded and made me kind of averse to playing those games. I still enjoy the narrow snippet of those games, mostly just Wuthering Waves, that do things differently, like the combat system. I log into Wuthering Waves every single day still to do my dailies, or just half the dailies, because even doing all of the dailies is kind of too much trouble for me in Wuthering Waves at this point. But I still want to get Jinxie because the limited characters in Wuthering Waves, I had a pretty negative opinion of the characters and their design going into Wuthering Waves, but what I've found is that the limited characters are just like so cool compared to the standard banner characters. I feel like the standard banner characters, except for maybe Kocharo, are just like so boring in terms of their design. But they really leveled up their animations and design for the limited characters. GN was a game changer. Ever since I got GN, I enjoyed the game so much more. After I started doing the holograms, I just enjoyed the game so much more, and I've done most of them to level 6 now, except for Crownless. I haven't done that one yet, and I haven't gone to difficulty 6 for Tempest Mephis and what's it called, the Phalanx Baringo, because I don't have a lightning unit that is well built at this point, and I don't have, they're all like 20 levels below 90, so I can't really do difficulty 6 right now. But essentially, the reason why I haven't done that is because I don't want to go around collecting echoes. I don't want to explore the world in Wuthering Waves because, again, this is subjective, but I'm not that interested in the world building of these gacha games when they are open worlds and they do the exact same way of building the world as Genshin Impact. It just feels like it's too similar. And I think that is the major achievement of Zenless, which is that it manages to have the same polish as well as world building, at least on the same level and quality as Genshin Impact, without feeling like it is Genshin Impact. It feels like it's more like Persona 5. It feels like a more traditional JRPG with like corridors, and that's fine. It worked for Honkai Star, and I think it also works for Zenless Zone Zero when it tries to be like a Persona 5 like. I like the fact that the world is more dense. It feels like the characters, which I actually had also a negative impression of when I first went into the game. Similar to Wuthering Waves, I thought the characters looked worse than Genshin characters and Honkai Star characters even, and I don't even like Honkai Star character design that much. But my general opinion of the Zenless characters was that they were under-designed, that they didn't have as much things that looked unique to them. But after I got into the game, this is just one of the things that makes it feel like it's actually on the same level as Genshin Impact without being the same as Genshin, which is that the characters are much more emotive. The animations for the faces feel like they're doing more expressions. Um, the animations inside the combat, in my opinion, are superior to Genshin and definitely superior to Honkai Star, especially out in the open world. Inside the combat, they kind of just stand there. So they feel like they're there to impress. That they feel like fighting game characters. I know that they have been doing this marketing, tying themselves to fighting games, and I feel like that's kind of a kappa right there. The fact that they're trying to compare themselves to fighting games. I know that they're not directly saying that they're trying to compare themselves to fighting games, but let's be honest, the combat for this game is not nearly as complex. It's like this is a baby's action combat game, and I actually feel like that's fine. Another thing that has happened since Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves and all these different gacha games come out with near same value or superior, or they're basically just similar production budgets as Genshin, is that I feel like each of these gacha games are just doing their own niche and they don't really cross over into other niches. This is something that I've changed my mind on over the past couple of months, which is that the way I interact with these games is no longer, oh, I have to enjoy every single part of this game. I don't have to enjoy the open world in Zenless, I mean, the open world in Wuthering Waves. I don't need to enjoy the combat as much as Wuthering Waves and Zenless. I don't need to enjoy like, well, I actually enjoy almost everything in Genshin Impact. I enjoy most things in Genshin Impact. That is still for me like the most broad of all the games because it does kind of a little bit of everything, but it doesn't do any of those things that well. So that for me is still my main gacha game. But when you go to like Arknights, it's a tower defense game. When you go to um, Tower Fantasy, to be honest, I don't like anything about Tower Fantasy, so let's just ignore that. But mainly Genshin Impact, Honkai Star, Zenless, and Wuthering Waves. I feel like all of these things, all of these games do different enough things that I can enjoy them on their own level without having to, just compare them holistically to another game. I'm not comparing Wuthering Waves combat to Zenless right now, even though we all acknowledge that Wuthering Waves has more complex and more difficult combat, because that is no longer a thing that I am seeking in new gacha games. I already have that difficult content in Wuthering Waves, so why am I trying to seek that in Zenless Zone Zero as well? It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me now that I think about it, because I'm already getting the same experience in one game, and that game is not going to stop updating. So if I can get that same experience in a new update, then why am I looking for that same experience in Zenless Zone Zero? Also, just because Zenless Zone Zero has more, in my opinion, attractive characters and they do a better job of building those characters and having them interact with each other in ways that I find fun compared to Wuthering Waves, doesn't mean that I no longer enjoy Wuthering Waves. It's just that I continue to enjoy Wuthering Waves in that very narrow aspect. So let's get into why I think Zenless Zone Zero has actually exceeded my expectations. And this is, again, going to tie back into my initially quite low expectations for Zenless, for their characters, as well as the TV system, as well as just the world in general. So I've already talked about how the animations for the characters has actually exceeded my expectations, and that has made the characters feel more real. Another reason why I feel like the characters are better than I expected is that the world does a good job of emphasizing, of like putting the focus on those characters. I've noticed that some of the characters actually appear in the open world in contexts that are more interesting than in Genshin Impact and Honkai Star. In Genshin Impact, they don't appear in the open world as well. In Honkai Star, after you finish the story, they do appear in the open world. But in Zenless, what I've seen is that after in the first moment, I think in one of the first moments where you actually get to explore the city neighborhood block that your main hub is in, I found that Billy was looking at his car, and then I had a conversation with him, and I just found and that was like the first sign that the characters actually exist within their own context, that they have their own story going on, besides just their relationship to you as the main character. And then I saw Ellen beside an arcade machine and I could also talk to her. And there was another time when I saw Ellen with her friends. And what really impressed me was that Ellen was actually in another outfit compared to her combat form. So she has two in-game skins that are completely different. She has like a casual school skin, high school skin, and then she has like the combat maid skin. And just like this little extra bit of nuance to her character, it's something that some shonen animes don't even do. They don't even show the characters. All of the characters just wear the same outfit all the time. It's mostly like the more like grown-up mangas or the I don't know what there's a specific word for it, but basically the non-shonen mangas, sometimes they will give the characters different outfits at different times. And I think that this is what Zenless Zone Zero has also done. And I hope that it's not just restricted Ellen. In the future, I would like to see more characters in different outfits, just not even character outfits that you can buy, just them wearing different things during different times of their life, doing different things in the open world. It's not an open world, it's just basically a corridor that you have. It's like a little city neighborhood block. It's an instant zone. So these characters, even though they don't have the over the top design as Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, the way that their clothes and their animations give you an idea of their character is on another level compared to these games. In fact, I feel like they are on another level compared to any other gacha game. So the character design, the world design, all go together and then combine together to emphasize what these characters are like inside their lives, more so than any other gacha game I've experienced. It feels more like a story that is going on and that you're just a part of rather than you being the focus of that attention. The fact that I'm not like so far the main character that is just like the savior of this world. I'm just the hacker, I'm Phaethon. Um, it feels like a fresh experience. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm a person who was ordained by God, or I'm actually a hidden god like the Traveler, or whoever it is that was like doing whatever with you at the very beginning of Wuthering Waves. I think she was touching your face or something. It's obvious that you have some kind of special relationship to her, but it feels like you're less special, and I think that's actually a good thing. I'm not a self-insert character. I find the fact that the main character actually speaks and has like an existing relationship with her sibling is just so cool. It feels different. It feels fresh. It feels not the same as all of these other Genshin likes as and Genshin itself. It feels like they already skipped all the parts of Genshin Impact where the main character has to find the sibling, and they just skipped to the part where they already found their sibling and they're just having a slice of life adventure now. That's what Zone Zero kind of feels like. So again, it goes back to the fact that it feels different from Genshin. I want things that feel different from Genshin, and the way I interact with the games now is that if it feels different from Genshin, then that's a good thing. But it should have the same quality as Genshin Impact. It has to have the same production value as Genshin. And Zenless Zone Zero has that in spades. The UI, even though it might look a bit confusing, I like the way that it looks different. I like the way that it doesn't feel immediately familiar to me like Wuthering Waves does, even though, the combat is obviously different, even though Tower Fantasy is obviously an MMO. Well, actually, that's not true. The worlds in the MMO Tower Fantasy is actually pretty small. There's like very few amount of people that a world can contain at the same time when I was playing it. So let's just ignore Tower Fantasy. You shouldn't even compare Tower Fantasy to Wuthering Waves. Wuthering Waves is just so much better. So okay, I'm done trying to compare things to Tower Fantasy. Okay, let's just move on. Some of the things that I also expected to not like the TV system. I heard a lot of people complain about the TV system when, well, actually, people are still complaining about the TV system, but I don't mind it at all. It's like such a smaller part of the game than I was expecting. People made it out to be like 80% or 90% of the game, but whatever they did with the CBT or whatever, or the closed beta or whatever changes they made during that time, it feels like the TV system is more like 20% of the game. And I actually even like how they present the TV system. I like the fact that we're doing little puzzles. And again, it's different from Genshin Impact. Not all things that are just different from Genshin are automatically better. But I definitely feel like this is something that has been blown out of proportion. It feels like it's more like 20% or 10% of the game if you're doing all of the combat challenges compared to like the 80% that people were talking about. So far, I've only seen it in the main story, and I've only seen it during like some of the commissions. It's basically just like the little puzzles. This is what replaces the puzzles in Honkai Star and Genshin Impact. Don't people realize that without this, there would be no puzzles in this game? So this is just the puzzles that we have always been doing in these gachas. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to be, the best thing of all time, but we're going to do them anyways because they give us primo gems, because they give us chests or whatever. And here it's just we do them because, well, it's the exact same thing. So I don't know why people were so mad about them in the first place, or I just don't know. It's like confusing to me. So moving on, the TV system is just okay. It's not the best thing of all time. It's just that what we have always been doing in another format. If we weren't doing this, we would just be doing open world puzzles or those clocky puzzles in Penacony. It's no different from that to me, but in a different way. And I think it's even the graphics for me. When I first saw them on my screen during a live stream I was watching, they look like shit. But now that I look at them, they look better. I don't know why. I like the graphics. I like how they animate the TVs. Maybe it's just my nostalgia getting to me. I am 31 years old at this point, so I have some nostalgia for tube TVs. I don't know what they're actually called. There's like a specific term for them, but they're basically tube TVs. This game has a lot of early 2000s and late 90s nostalgia. Even though they have like even the Play Store, the random Play Store that you run, isn't that like Rogers Video or something? I'm in Canada, so I don't know if Rogers Video existed in the United States or basically like a video rental place. I wonder how that makes sense in this world because they have the internet, right? So what do they use the internet for if not streaming? um, it's just a little bit weird. It's like they want to have this high tech sci-fi esque uh, feeling world, and then at the same time they want this late 90s and early 2000s feeling experience as well to make it feel a little bit different. So those are the things that initially concern me. The characters not being as cool as Genshin Impact, not a thing. The TV system being really boring and really tedious for me. They're not nearly as ubiquitous as people made them out to be. And I find that playing them is also not as bad as I thought they would be. In fact, I sometimes enjoy them. I definitely prefer them to just going around the open world and picking up chests again or doing open world quests. And that's just a me thing. That is a perfectly biased thing for me to say. It's perfectly fine for you to disagree with me, but that is a major part of why I actually prefer Zenless Zone Zero to other open world gachas that are just doing another Genshin like thing again. Um okay, here is one of the biggest downers for me that I didn't expect, which is that the story is not that interesting, at least so far. Again, I've only done up to the part where Miyabi is like shitting on the giant mecha, but the way that they have presented the story in different parts, there are like two different parts of the story. There is the comic strips, and then there is the visual novel faces talking towards each other thing that they are doing. The visual novel type experience is not the greatest. It is like maybe like a 6 or 7 out of 10 for me, and it is the single-handedly pulling this game down from a 10 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10. Um, why is it bad? Well, one, the animations for the faces are in general good. The expressions that they do are good, but their animations for their mouths are very, very tiny. They're very, very minimal. Sometimes it's very hard to tell who is even talking unless you look at the name for the person doing the talking that shows up when their dialogue is happening. So I don't know why this is. It feels like they kind of cheaped out on the mouth animations, and it's not just the animations itself. The story itself, I wouldn't say it's bad, but the way that it's presented and the way it makes it feels like it's a more disconnected, a more disconnected slice of life story makes it so that it's very hard for me to get a feel of where this story is going. I feel like they needed a draw, a hook earlier in the story to get me into it. Like, oh, we're talking to the cutting hairs, and now the cutting hairs are no longer that relevant. Now we're dealing with the Miyabi gang, and now we're dealing with another gang. That's fine, but they need to hook us with an overarching storyline faster. And now that I have gone to a place in the story where I'm seeing like the Vision Corporation, maybe they will do something with that. There's like a cool looking character that I saw in the comic strip. The leader, one of the leaders of the Vision Corporation, the woman, I thought she looked pretty cool. So in the future, maybe they will show more of her, and we'll get a more overarching storyline, and we'll know what is actually going on and who the big baddie is. I thought that one of the things they did really well was that they actually introduced Nanook very early on in the story for Genshin Impact. And then in the Lawfu, we realized that Nanook was going to be the big baddie, at least for the current story arc of not Genshin, Honkai Star. that in Luofu, we realized that the big baddie for Honkai Star, at least for the current arc, is going to be Nanook. And I thought that was a very smart thing to do because otherwise I would have no idea why we were doing what we were doing in Honkai Star. And yeah, we haven't really touched on Nanook that much, but just knowing that that is going to be a goal that we are working towards, or at least the story is going to be pushing us towards, is okay for me. And that has not showed up in Zenless yet. I have not done all of the story. I think I'm only maybe like 40% of the way through the story, maybe even 30%. So there is still a lot for me to cover. But those are basically my thoughts right now. Oh yeah, and there's also combat. I touched a bit on this early on. I said that the combat didn't. I think what I said was that combat didn't need to be as good as Wuthering Waves because I enjoy these games in smaller snippets now. Like there is the Zenless Zone Zero for me is like the Persona 5 vibes game. This is a game that has a Persona 5 like story and art style and animation. Not animation. The animations for Persona 5 are actually kind of crap, but it has the feeling of Persona 5 in a game that has the production values of Genshin Impact, and that is what I enjoy most. The combat itself is like, what if you dumbed down Wuthering Waves combat, combined it with Honkai Impact Third, and made it have the same difficulty as Genshin Impact? That is what the combat of Wuthering Waves feels like to me. But here's the thing, because I already have the combat in Wuthering Waves, I no longer feel like I need to have that same combat experience in Zenless Zone Zero. I don't know why everybody keeps on saying, "Oh, the Wuthering Waves combat is so much better than Zenless." I know it's better. I know that it's more complex. I know that it's more intricate, that the difficulty is higher. But I already have that in Zenless, not Zenless, Wuthering Waves. I have that in Elden Ring. I play all of those games. I'm not just a gacha gamer. So why would I want the same thing again in Zenless? It's perfectly okay to like these two different things and to like Wuthering Waves combat more, but I also find that I have things that I like more about Zenless, particularly animations, the characterization, and how they characterize the characters through the world itself. That makes me more interested in Zenless for that factor than Wuthering Waves. And to be honest, the fact that the difference between the combat in Wuthering Waves versus Zenless to me is not as large as the difference between the characterization. It's not that the Wuthering Waves characters don't look cool, but they feel disconnected from the world itself. I don't feel like the reason why I like Wuthering Waves characters is because they look cool and they do cool animations. Jinxi summons a giant dragon and he does a breath-like attack. And that's what I like about Jinxi. I don't really know what she's about in the story. I think she has like some kind of special relationship with a character, a dragon called Jie. I haven't done the 1.1 story yet. So like that's all I know about her. With Zenless Zone Zero, I'm already like, oh, um, I already know Colita has a special relationship with the giant bear, and they have like all this unique interactions because I did a demo for her, and she has like this combined ultimate that she does with the bear, and like that's more organic characterization between two characters than Wuthering Waves has done in its entire game, and that's what I like about Zenless. It's really that simple. I'm playing these games for different reasons. And for me, the reasons why I like Zenless are more important than the reasons why I like Wuthering Waves. I think Wuthering Waves has a lot of potential, but and Zenless and Wuthering Waves has done a much better job of, from what I see, the region in 1.1 is way more interesting than anything in the game so far. And Wuthering Waves is doing a very good job of making the characters look interesting, but the fact that it's an open world is just a downer that I will never really get over because I already have that same experience in Genshin Impact. And I am very happy that that is not what I'm getting in Zenless Zone Zero. Zenless Zone Zero's entire vibe from the UI, which I know that people have said looks too busy or too complicated or too convoluted, whatever, it's basically just a negative. It doesn't look as clean as the other UIs. I think it looks better than Wuthering Waves. I think it looks better than Tower Fantasy. Genshin Impact is actually the only game that does the Genshin UI the best. And I'm happy that they're not just going with Genshin UI 2.0 again. And I think that is basically all my thoughts on Zenless Zone Zero so far. It's a very, I feel like it's a very polarized game. I've read some of the comments on Reddit. I've read some of, actually, Twitter has been mostly positive from what I've seen, but maybe I just haven't looked at enough Twitter. But I do know that this game is a very polarizing game. It feels like people are being very negative about it in, some areas. A lot of content creators have basically acknowledged that the combat is not all that. But I just don't know why people are privileging it so much. Privileging the combat so much. It is the main gameplay style, but I feel like if you're going into a gacha game, and despite how good Wuthering Waves combat is, it does still have its problems. It does feel janky at times. Like after 1.1 patch, after I do like a swap between characters, what I feel like is happening right now is that it just keeps on zooming into my character's ass all the time. Have you guys noticed that? It just keeps on zooming into my character's ass. And before they patched it, I believe Tempest Memphis, I believe they've already patched this, but Tempest Memphis, when I was fighting him, trying to do difficulty 5, every time I hit the fucking clone, it would just like spaz out and keep on like it go bing, 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 and does the fucking yellow light. You have to know what I'm talking about if you do the holograms, you know what I'm talking about. It's so frustrating. There are just so much jank in Withering Waves, and that is largely absent from Zenless Zone Zero. There are a couple of like stuttering and FPS issues, but it's not as consistent and it's not as bad as Withering Waves. I don't want to make it sound like Zenless Zone Zero is doing everything right. I am extremely biased against open world games at this point, other than Genshin Impact. So for me, if it's a 9 out of 10, without the if Zenless Zone Zero was an open world, I would give it currently a 7 out of 10. And yeah, that's all my thoughts right now. This is Bench Gamer signing out.